There's a specific brand of love interest that has become super popular lately. I think every single fantasy book that becomes popular on booktok has this character archetype. He is a hot, mysterious man with dark hair. He has shadow or darkness magic. He's morally gray. He is at least a century old, but he still looks like a hot young man. And he falls in love with our female main character, who is barely of legal age. I've noticed that there isn't like a name for this type of character. We don't have a trope name for it the way we have a name for example, a manic pixie dream girl. But online, I've seen people refer to this type of love interest as shadow daddies. So today we're gonna do a deep dive into shadow daddies. That was the doorbell. It's probably the police coming to get me for unironically using the word shadow daddy. Turns out it was just a book package. Let's unbox it by the Christmas tree. Did you know you can also treat yourself on a book package every month with the sponsor of today's video, Book of the Month? I think Book of the Month is the best way to discover new books, new authors, any title that you may not have otherwise heard from before, but that are gonna be super, super good. Because every single month their team goes through hundreds of books to find the best books for that month across a multitude of genres. And then you get to pick one from that list, and mine is in this box. That way you always have the best new thing to read. I picked The 13th Child. This is like a dark fairy tale fantasy, which is exactly what I like to read during December. And I also picked another December read, and that is, I love this title, The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year. Described as a knives out rom-com with rivals to lovers. Perfect. They actually color amazingly together on the shelf. Wow, love that. Oh, that's so cute. Holiday stickers. And right now all new members will also get a fun holiday sticker sheet when you join, and you can get your first Book of the Month hardcover for only $5 if you use the code TINSEL. So click the link in my description, use the code TINSEL, and join Book of the Month today. I've printed out the most popular shadow daddies, and today we're gonna go through all of them and also just discuss why this trope is so popular. Why are we so attracted to shadow and darkness magic? And also, why are they all 500+ year old? Falling in love with 19-year-old main characters, and why is nobody talking about it? Why do we keep, including me, why do I keep falling for it instead of seeing it for what it is, and that is a huge age gap romance? I'm gonna put them on the wall and we're gonna go through them from smallest age gap to largest age gap. And the largest age gap is going to be like thousands of years. We're gonna start with Xaden from Fourth Wing. This is the only shadow daddy that I think isn't immortal. Like, he's 23 years old, but he does have shadow powers, so a lot of people mentioned him as like a famous shadow daddy. Xaden controls and wields shadows, and he can also hide himself in them. He can use the shadows to track his opponents, and he is also like an extremely powerful fighter, like very feared in the Fourth Wing book. He is 23 years of age, making the age gap between him and our female main character Violet only 3 years. That's the smallest age gap we're gonna see today. Also, by the way, I've made sure that for all the fan art that I'm using in this video, the fan artists are okay with reposting. And also, I just want to say, it is so hard nowadays to find fan art that isn't AI generated. So just an extra bit of love for all the fan artists I'm gonna show today, and they will all be linked in the description. Next up, we have Rune Dadden from Crescent City. I actually haven't read Crescent City, but every time I hear the name Rune Dadden, I just think of that TikTok sound, and my mind just goes, Rune Dadden, Crown Prince. And then there's like a cool edit. Rune is actually one of the main characters of Crescent City, and he technically also has light powers, but he doesn't really use them because light powers aren't sexy. He mostly uses his shadow powers. He can summon and manipulate shadows, cloak himself into them, walk into them. He is 75 years of age. because he's fave, making him older. His love interest, and I've heard that this is kind of a spoiler, so I won't say who it is, but there is a 28 years old age gap, and the love interest is 47 years old. So again, it's not too weird here. It's not too weird. Also, by the way, I decided to dress like what I imagine one of the peasant girls would wear that is definitely going to be swept up and romanced by one of the shadow daddies. I think I'm embodying the energy quite right. Next up we have Niktos from A Shadow in the Ember by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Niktos is literally the god of death. He doesn't have any like literal shadow powers, but he is the ruler of the Shadowlands, the god of death. Shadow and death themes tend to be pretty popular among the shadow daddies, and I think that's why a lot of people call him a shadow daddy as well. We're gonna take a big jump from here because Niktos is I'm not even showing you. Niktos is 240 years old, and his love interest, Serafina, she's 20. So we've got our first century plus age gap. Remember, we had 3 years, 47 years, 220. So I'm just gonna put him over here because that's quite the jump. There we go. Before I continue with this, let's just take a moment to discuss the appeal of the shadow powers, okay? I would say that shadow and darkness and death powers are just an extremely on-the-nose way to communicate that we are dealing with a dark and brooding, morally gray character. Like, he's literally shrouded in darkness. It's a little on the nose. It is a physical manifestation of the brooding bad boy character that has been around for ages. And I think authors at some point just realized if you give him shadow powers, it just triples or quadruples his shadowy bad boy levels. Shadow and darkness are associated with danger, so that of course makes our love interest seem like more dangerous and more forbidden. And most of the shadow daddies that we're going to be discussing today, they don't just have shadow magic, you know, they have extremely strong shadow magic. It isn't always about the fact that they have darkness as their magic, but the fact that they have extremely powerful magic. And at least at the beginning of the story, most of them tend to be way more powerful than their female love interests. Maybe they can teach their partner, maybe our female main character becomes stronger throughout the trilogy, series, whatever, but they start out with a huge difference in power. And I think that it's this massive amount of power that makes the shadow daddy so attractive and so interesting for a lot of readers. But rarely does the shadow daddy get involved with a love interest that is more powerful or of equal power as himself. Maybe she gets there eventually, but not at the beginning. I will say the ones that we've discussed so far don't have that huge of a power difference with their female love interest. I mean, except the fact that this one is literally the god of death, if I've understood it correctly. But as you'll notice, it honestly seems like the bigger the age gap, the more powerful shadow magic our man has, okay? Next example. Here we have what I think the original shadow daddy, if there ever is one, and that is the Darkling from Shadow and Bone. He has literally darkness magic and is the only one in this world that has darkness magic. He can create darkness, use it to slice through the air and kill people. He's by far the most powerful magic wielder in the Shadow and Bone universe. The only one that can match him is our main character, our female main character, Alina, as she has light magic, but she's very new to her magic. So at the beginning of the book, he is way more powerful than she is. His age is relatively unspecified, but we know that he is at least 400 years old. And Alina is 17. I think she's the only underage character that we're going to be talking about. Making their age gap at least 383 years. Now I will say, and this is potentially a spoiler if you haven't seen the show or read the books, but the Darkling turns out to really be the villain. So that's why it kind of makes sense that this age gap is like insane, because it's kind of the point of the story, is that he has a lot of power over Alina, which initially makes him really attractive and makes us fall for him, but then he turns on her and he becomes the villain. So I'm not mad at it. Okay, there we go. So even though I believe that the Darkling is the original Shadow Daddy, I think we all know that there is one character that most of these other characters are based on, one character that is so popular for being a hot, powerful, shadowy, immortal man that every other love interest that you read about in romantasy nowadays is very clearly inspired by this one. And that is Rhysand from A Court of Thorns and Roses. He is the High Lord of the Night Court, so he controls shadows and darkness. He's also the most powerful shadow wielder in the A Court of Thorns and Roses universe, or at least at the beginning of the series. Everyone fears him and his immense powers. Typical Shadow Daddy. A lot of people also call one of the side characters, Azrael, a Shadow Daddy. I didn't put him on here because as far as I know, he doesn't have a love interest yet. So we couldn't really analyze the age gap there. But let's talk about this age gap, okay? Because Rhysand is 535 years old. And his love interest, Fira, is 19 years old. They're always 19 years old. A lot of these characters, they're always like 19 or 20 years old because then they're like, you know, just legal. just legal. Why they can never just be 30-year-old women? Why aren't these men falling in love with just 30-year-old women? Explain that to me. Well, it's because we don't like women that are middle-aged and don't look youthful anymore. I actually think that's the answer. So the age gap here is 516 years. Ooh, we're already getting a little bit too far to that side, because trust me, bigger age gaps are coming. Okay, let's chat a little bit about these age gaps, shall we? Why are there these huge century-long age gaps in these romantasy books? And why do people like them so much? Here's the thing. If the immense shadow powers don't already contribute to this, the huge gap in age causes a massive power difference between our Shadow Daddy and his female love interest. I think ultimately that is the appeal of these 500-plus-year-old magical king high lords. It's not really about their age, it's about the power difference that springs from it. And it's this big power difference that a lot of people just find really sexy. It kind of makes it dangerous, it makes it a little bit forbidden. Now, there's nothing wrong with being attracted to power differences. It's just that the difficult thing that happens is that you end up with a relationship that is not in balance. And I hope we can all see that you're gonna get a lot of problems when there's a huge power imbalance in your relationship, specifically when it comes to consent. I'm gonna talk about consent again. This is the book Leo. Now, I'm sure we're all aware that consent is very important in a relationship. If someone doesn't consent to, for example, sex or anything else, that's wrong. But sometimes when there's power differences, consent can become a little bit more vague. For example, if you have a boss-employee relationship, the employee may consent to someone just because they're afraid that they could get fired. Or if there's a teacher-student relationship, the student can consent to something, but they may just be doing it because they're afraid they're gonna get a bad grade, or because they keep the teacher's opinion in very high regard because they see them as a person of authority. AKA, power differences can make consent very, very murky. And I think this is what happens in these kinds of immortal age gap, power, magic difference relationships, is because there's such a huge power imbalance between the man and the woman, it kind of makes the consent kind of murky and vague as well. And a lot of these books try to present themselves as feminist, you know? They all have like strong female characters that usually at the end of the trilogy become like super powerful magic wielders. These love interests are usually known to be like very feminist and standing up for their wife. But I've never seen any of these books address that there is a huge power difference between our shadow daddy and our female main character, and how this power difference influences the consent that is between them. I would say the only exception to this might be the Darkling, because again, spoiler for Shadow and Bone, he turns out to be the villain. And the point of the story is that he did have too much power over Alina, and Alina kind of got swept up in his games. And he is, in fact, a dangerous man. But I think that's kind of the hard part because, like I said, power differences are seen as very attractive. It's usually what people kind of gravitate towards in romance novels. I mean, the examples that I just gave where the consent is murky with the boss-employee relationship and the teacher-student relationship, those are two really popular tropes in romance fiction. I think the shadow daddy trope is just another trope on the list of big power indifference tropes that are popular among romance readers. And the shadow daddy isn't even the first trope to bring this power difference to fantasy fiction. This is what Kathleen Taylor Coleman says about powerful immortal beings and their human female main characters. In fictional relationships involving a centuries-old male vampire with obvious magical or physical powers far outstripping the abilities of the average human living female of a normal lifespan, that power differential is dramatic. If you think about it, aren't shadow daddies just the new vampires? Aren't shadow daddies to fantasy romance what vampires were to paranormal romance? Just a thought. Just a thought. Rhysand really is the new Edward Cullen. Changed my mind. Like, they're both immortal beings that are often centuries older than our female main character. They're morally gray, and they have powers associated with danger. You know, vampires have drinking blood, which is very subtextual, dangerous, but also very sexy. And then the shadow daddies just have darkness power, which is, again, extremely on the nose. So I would say that the shadow daddy trope is just a new manifestation of the big power indifference trope that we see all throughout romance fiction. Okay, let's continue with one of our biggest age gaps. We have Luke from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Luke is a demonic entity slash devil slash handsome man. My type. He also doesn't have literal shadow powers, but I still think he counts as a shadow daddy because he's like the devil. He can grant wishes, and he has granted our main character, Addie LaRue, her wish of immortal life, and he kind of holds control over that wish and their bargain. So this guy's age, I couldn't find this guy's exact age, but given the fact that he's basically the devil, I would say his age is like infinity, making their age gap infinity minus 330, because Addie is, I think, our first girly and only girly that herself is also centuries old. So woohoo, go them. So although this age gap is by far the largest one that we've discussed so far, I also have very few problems with it because Addie is also 300 years old. Like, if you yourself also have been around for centuries, at some point the age gap doesn't become that big of a problem, right? Because the problem with these age gaps with these like 19-year-old girls is that you have so little life experience that you're very easily manipulated by an older man. But if you yourself have been walking this earth for 300 years, I think your frontal lobe has developed enough. That being said, there still is a clear power difference between these characters, given the fact that he holds all power over their bargain and her immortality. Okay, I'm just gonna put these all the way here since it's bigger age gap, like thousands and thousands of years age gap really makes these age gaps seem like nothing at all. Now, before I move on to the final and biggest age gap of all, I just want to discuss, is it like bad, these immortal age gaps? I think most people, when they hear about a romance book with like a 50-year-old man and a 20-year-old girl, would be like, oh, that's a little icky, you know? You tend to only read that if you specifically are into age gap romances. And yet, these books with 100+ year age gaps are incredibly popular. Why is that? Why do we tend to have a problem when the age gap is like 30 years, but we don't really seem to have a problem when it's 200 years? I myself don't like age gap romances, but I do like these types of romances. I've never really had a problem with them, to be honest, and I've always enjoyed them. Let me know your theory on this, but I personally think it's because the age gap is so big that it just completely crosses into the realm of fantasy so far outside of what you know that you're also not really applying real life ethics to it anymore, because it's fantasy. Is this romanticizing age gap romances? I don't know if I believe that. I don't think these types of romances are gonna make women believe that they should date men that are like 30 years older than them. It's making women believe that they should date men that are 300 years older than them. And that's not possible. It's definitely romanticizing power differences. I don't think it's romanticizing age gap differences. And if it was, should we be blaming women for that? Should we be blaming these books for that? Because I think just generally as a society, we are telling women that they should be attracted to like older, experienced men. Have you ever noticed how for women, it is mostly youth that is romanticized and sexualized? Once you lose your youth and your girlhood, you are no longer attractive to society. So women try to hold on to that as much as possible. But for men, getting older still makes you attractive. Do you have gray hair? You're a silver fox. Are you losing your youthful boyishness? You just have a dad bod. Older men will be described as experienced and therefore attractive. But you never see people complimenting older women for being sexy and experienced. You know, they're sexy because they still look so young. Experienced is an attractiveness signifier that we tend to only use for men. So I really don't think it's that much of a surprise that so many women enjoy reading novels where the love interests are hyper experienced, hyper older men. They do still look young though, I will say that. Maybe these immortal age gap romances are so popular because it gives women the fantasy of being with an older experienced man without like the ickiness of it really feeling like you're being with an older man because it's like so far removed from reality. I don't know about you, but I would much rather have all these books with 500+ year old love interest than that the next big booktok trend becomes love interests that are in their 40s. I don't know. As you can tell, I have very like muddled thoughts about this that are kind of all over the place. Please let me know your opinion. I don't have that much of a problem with these huge fantasy age gap romances. I will say, why are they always falling in love with 20-year-old women? Why can't they fall in love with the middle-aged women? Okay, why can't they fall in love with another immortal being? Okay, I would like to see a romance between two shadow daddies. That is a gap in the market. Okay, I want to see fan fiction of the Darkling and Versand. I'm actually so sure that already exists. That has to exist. Okay, anyway, I think these immortal age gap romances can be done right even. Which brings me to my final age gap shadow daddy. So in Belladonna, which is a young adult novel by the way, our love interest is death. Like the literal concept of death. The Grim Reaper. There's nothing in life more powerful and inevitable than death. Anyway, not only does he lovely, lovely hot man, have control over life and death, he also controls shadows and darkness. He can even use his shadowy tendrils to touch our main character in intimate ways, if you know what I mean. And if you're hearing this and you think, oh my gosh, what on earth? Just read it and you'll be like, wait, why am I into this? Our main character, Signa, is only 18 years old, making this age gap infinity minus 19. Just gonna put it all the way over there. You can almost no longer see it because that is by far the largest age gap we'll talk about today. I will say that our main character Signa can escape death. That is like her whole thing, technically making her more powerful than her shadow daddy, even at the beginning of the book. Feminism. Now, however weird this sounds when I'm explaining this right now, I actually genuinely enjoyed that romance in Belladonna, because I think the author Adeline Grace really used the immortal shadow daddy trope and the huge age gap to actually add something to the story. Because here's the thing, there is something very otherworldly about immortal beings, and also something kind of lonely even. It is the perfect mirror for a young female character that feels like she doesn't really fit into the world. And this is why I really like the romance between Death and Signa. It is a romance between two people, question mark, two beings that are both very lonely and can't find genuine connection with others. Signa because she doesn't fit into like the Victorian time period, and Death because he's, you know, Death. The story really is about Signa escaping her mundane Victorian life that she doesn't fit into and learning to really be herself. Death gives her that escape, and that escape feels stronger. The metaphor feels stronger because he is some otherworldly grim reaper immortal being. So if you use it well, the immortal shadow daddy can genuinely add something to your story. And it is especially in these kinds of stories that I'm willing to just suspend my disbelief and forgive the huge age gaps that are there. So yeah, my conclusion is that I like the shadow daddy trope, but in my opinion, I would say that if you're gonna add a huge age gap to your story, have it actually contribute something to the plot and the theme. And two, maybe one book can like address the huge power differences between the female and the male character and like how that influences consent. I would like that. But let me know your take on the shadow daddy trope and maybe a better name for it, because I feel really weird unironically saying shadow daddy like 200 times in this video. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I want to end this video by giving a shout out to all of my patrons and a special shout out to all of my elite patrons whose names you can see here, and a warm welcome to all of the newest elite Patreon members: Ray Mirage, Anna, Sammy Amar, Polly and Existing, King Zachromatic, and Sophie TM. Welcome. I really hope that you all enjoyed this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you soon in another video very soon. Goodbye.